PS5 Pro hands-on previews are changing the entire conversation around this console. This is no longer a mid-gen refresh, this is a mid-gen leap. Numerous outlets were flown out to try 11 games on the PlayStation 5 Pro, and the response has been consistently positive and impressed. Digital Foundry has an hour-long video that you really need to check out. I'm going to be pulling information and quotes from that video in order to make my case that the PS5 Pro is a mid-gen leap. This is not just a mid-gen refresh. The price debate was already an embarrassing response given what Mark Cerny claimed the device was capable of. Weeks of PC-centric outlets and YouTubers tripping on themselves as they encouraged people to buy pre-made PCs that were twice as expensive and yet oftentimes weaker than the PS5 Pro. And in the wake of this new information and the hands-on analysis and the new B-roll footage, the price debate should vanish. The tech world and PC enthusiasts should be considering the capabilities of this machine and what it's outputting rather than getting hung up on the price. The praise and the breakdown from Digital Foundry and other outlets makes it undeniable. I said many times that this thing would be market disruptive, and it's already achieving that. Gamers and fans of tech should see this as a positive. It should push tech and game development forward. It should drive further innovation and upscaling improvements. And when you hear what some of these games are achieving and how the experts are describing it, it just might change your mind. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to hear what you think. So if you like this content, hit like and subscribe. When the initial coverage and the reactions were hitting after the PS5 Pro announcement, I kept saying that folks were getting ahead of themselves. Wait for the guys like Digital Foundry and other outlets to get their hands on this thing, and they did. And what they are saying is far exceeding what I expected. There was a capture event in San Francisco, and there was 3 hours to basically play 11 games. They were also given B-roll from Sony. So I'm just going to quickly walk through the 11 games, and I'm going to give you choice comments and things that were said. I'm also going to give you info about what these games are hitting. So up first is F1 24, running at a 4K 60 quality mode. It had 3 individual ray tracing effects added, and I have to say the footage looked crazy. I was looking at the ground. The level of detail that's being maintained at full speed is just impressive. Digital Foundry described it as a stunning visual difference and almost a generational leap. This is very high praise. This is really driving me to say this is not just a mid-gen refresh. It honestly looked like something I have never really seen before in a game. There was details on the road. There was glass. Even transparent surfaces looked more realistic as they interacted with lights and shadows. It was genuinely jaw-dropping. They did say, though, that the image was a bit less stable when running at this level, but it was worth the trade-off for just how good that it looked. It even had an 8K 30 ray tracing mode. Not a lot of demand for 8K right now, but definitely something that we're going to see more of in the future. Then GT7, Gran Turismo 7, has 2 new modes, a ray tracing mode and an image quality priority mode, and I really think we already got great feedback on this, so I don't want to belabor the point. This thing seems to be hitting incredible performance as well. Digital Foundry seemed to echo the same sentiments about just how good it looks. What I really want to talk about is Horizon Forbidden West. This PS5 Pro footage looks significantly better hands-on. It's really hard, I think, sometimes to see the improvements through YouTube because of compression, and it was being described by Digital Foundry as the new mode is so stable and impressive, and it was the best overall image quality at the event. And you can clearly see even through YouTube why it's being described in this way. They are getting very, very good performance out of this game and very consistent frames per second. The Decima engine continues to prove itself to be a force, and I'm very excited to see maybe what they were able to pull off with Death Stranding 2. Now, Hogwarts Legacy is worth looking at because this one was getting thrown out there as, oh, it's 30 FPS, it's 30 FPS. And I continue to say that I did not think they would give the PS5 Pro Enhanced label to games that were capped at 30 FPS. So to be clear, there will still be fidelity modes that run at 30, and Hogwarts Legacy is one of those games. There is a 30 FPS fidelity ray tracing mode with basically more ray tracing. It's got ray tracing reflections, improved resolution. There's also ray tracing shadows that look more realistic. And this is what they focused on. Now, performance mode is also using some of the fidelity mode settings, so even performance mode looks better. So you are still getting a visual uptick if you decide that you prefer to play the game at 60. But if you're wanting stunning screenshots or you don't mind 30 FPS, the ray tracing truly looks impressive. They were running the ray tracing at like higher resolution and all this stuff. It looked really, really good. And apparently it looked even better than the footage that you can see on YouTube. Now, Ratchet & Clank and Spider-Man 2 were sort of taken as a pair unit because similar things are being done, similar techniques, because it's Insomniac. Spider-Man 2, the PS5 was a lot more detailed compared to performance mode. I think this is where you do see the biggest difference, like if you look at the details in the trees. And Insomniac said at this event they even want to do more than they already have. So they're already figuring out new things they can do with the advanced ray tracing. So this is something that you really need to take away from these events and from this information, is that devs are just now kind of cracking the surface of what this thing can do, and they're going to do more in the future. The Fidelity Pro mode was also using more ray tracing techniques as well in Spider-Man 2. I think Spider-Man 2 is harder to see the differences. What you really want to look at is the fact that you're getting fidelity level graphics and the frames per second stays at 60. I think that's something that's getting lost in a lot of the comparisons, even one that I read, I believe it was The Verge. And I really feel like what's getting lost is there's a bunch of us that are accustomed to choosing performance. We're now going to get the fidelity levels and the lighting and the ray tracing that we're not used to getting, but we're going to maintain that 60. I think a lot of the people that are going to jump from fidelity or jump from these ray tracing modes into these new modes, they'll notice the smoothness in the frames per second. But the rest of us that have been using performance mode for such a long time, we are going to notice that uptick in resolution and the added ray tracing as well. So Ratchet & Clank was described as looking more natural, not over sharpened, because it does use some sharpening things that Digital Foundry says they don't really feel the need to do now. It holds up better than Spider-Man 2 with image quality, probably because of the lower or slower traversal. You're not quite like screaming through areas of Ratchet & Clank. Some of the areas where you're on like the grind, I'm sure, but mainly the game just did not look as unstable. That's one of the things that is happening as they're pushing things to their limits. But we were told during this sort of video, this sort of breakdown, that when you're sitting at normal viewing distances and you're not like zooming in, you're not going to notice a lot of that stuff. I'm going to touch on that in a moment with The Last of Us 2. The big takeaway here, and the thing that stood out to me, is that Digital Foundry described this as looking like a native 4K render. Okay, it looks substantially more detailed and crisp. The image stability did have some breakup, and this is where the peaks of the PSSR can be seen, but some of those weaknesses as well. But they pointed out and said, listen, if you're sitting at typical viewing distance and you're not like zooming in like they do for their analysis, it just isn't noticeable. Overall, they describe this as being a native 4K image. That is extremely impressive. It means the upscaling can only get better if this is just kind of a first pass. You know, some of the early games pushing out patches, this could certainly improve even more with time. And we certainly have to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is the one that was sort of touted initially as like the biggest differences. It's being described as being extremely detailed. Now, it was a little unstable in similar ways that The Last of Us 2 was, but again, it's being described as worth it because the overall delivery is just so good. It's a pro enhanced mode that's targeting 4K 60, and they said that the 30 FPS mode was just absent. Like, you don't even really need to pick that anymore. This could mean that performance mode is basically better than quality mode, and there's just no reason to pick it anymore. They also looked at Crew Motorfest. It was way more detailed in performance mode. Way more detailed than performance mode. And there was, quote, a stunning amount of image detail. It was running at 4K 60. There were some tiny drops, but this was described as something that would be glossed over with VRR if you have a VRR television. Also, some of this stuff could just get fixed with time. They could go in and smooth things over. Some of these patches are likely continuing to get tweaked as we speak and as I record this video. Now, the Demon's Souls remake admittedly is already so stunning, they felt like, man, it looks so good, you kind of didn't even need to do this. But the Pro mode, they said that it looked 4K. It was a little soft, but they did say it looked 4K. So another game achieving what looks like a genuine 4K image. And then this one I think is a big one, because I think this is really going to put to bed some of the debates about whether or not GTA 6 could achieve 60. I think from everything we're hearing, I honestly think GTA 6 has a better chance now of hitting 60. Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, they're using PSSR to take it up from 1080 to 4K. It was running very well. And that actual thing that I came away with from this is that the city area, one of the areas that's most noticeable to having lower frames in like the 30s and 40s, it was pretty stable in the 50s. So this is one of the worst areas. This is one of the areas, and I was watching the frame breakdown. It was like in the mid 50s. Okay, this is within VRR range. So this is a Capcom title, and you may have noticed recently that they don't really focus on FPS consistency. Some of their optimization's been pretty bad. The latest details on Monster Hunter Wilds looks very concerning with respect to performance and optimization. So the fact that they were able to achieve this with Dragon's Dogma 2, I think is impressive. They said the image quality was better. They said the PSSR was doing a better job than the checkerboarding. So really excited to see what they can get accomplished with games like this, because this is a game that was CPU bottlenecked, and yet listen to the performance bump they're describing. I think that's impressive. I think it gives me some hope for GTA 6. Now, in this video, the question was asked, right? Is it worth the $700? That's what everybody's asking. That's why these hands-on previews are so helpful. Essentially, they said yes if you're wanting 60 FPS games. This kind of goes against one of the other clips that was floating around. If you're somebody that wants 60 FPS, if you really do value fidelity and ray tracing, both sides have a reason to get this system. Like, if you love fidelity and ray tracing, you're going to get smoother performance, and you're going to see that fidelity more clearly and see the ray tracing more clearly, because you'll have double the frames. If you're like me and you want 60 FPS in every game, that's not only maintaining on the PS5 Pro, because I don't think we're going to get 30 FPS games all that more anymore. We've gotten very few this gen, and a lot of them have patched in 60 later. But if you're like me and you want 60, this is definitely a system to get, because you're going to get to choose the thing you always bypass, which is fidelity, the quality, the ray tracing. If you want a hassle-free deliverance of high fidelity, you're really not going to get that out of a PC for a few years. This is essentially what Digital Foundry said. This is a gigantic increase in quality for some of the games, and these are just some of the earliest games to try to tap in and do this with a patch. None of these games have been built from the ground up with this in mind. Now, Digital Foundry also did an interview with IGN, and this is where things start to get interesting. The quote was that it kind of closes the gap on PC. You're getting high quality image, you're getting high frame rate, and in some modes you're also getting advanced ray tracing in there as well. This is being stated as, quote, it gives you a lot of that PC power in a console platform for the first time this generation. And the other quote, it's very compelling and it's the value proposition of the console. When you stack this all up, it really changes the entire discourse. And keep in mind, as I've said multiple times, these are just existing games that are pushing out patches and figuring out how to leverage the new ray tracing and the PSSR. Future patches could smooth out some of the stuff that we heard about, like image stability issues or even some of the little frame drops. Insomniac has already indicated they want to do more. And as far as I can tell, this thing is just getting started, which ultimately leads to my conclusion. As I said at the start of this video, this is not a mid-gen refresh. This is a mid-gen leap. To hear someone from Digital Foundry say this is closing the gap on PC, it really confirms so much of what I said previously. This will be market disruptive, to the point that I actually think that's Sony's goal. This is not landing like a mid-gen upgrade, it's landing like an opening salvo. It really makes you wonder. When Herman Holst said that they wanted to bring games to PC in the hopes that people might be compelled to come to PlayStation for a sequel, well, that decision gets easier and easier when the tech gets better and better. PlayStation seems to be setting its sights not just on being the king of consoles with respect to power, they are targeting being a tech leader in the gaming space, which makes sense. They're a tech company, and they're showing up really strong with the PS5 Pro. We saw glimpses of this, I think, with the PSVR 2 and the Portal, like really wanting to be a tech leader, to have things that other platforms don't. But the Pro is showing itself to be not just compelling to consumers, but to developers as well. Make no mistake, the breakdowns and the tech analysis of these games is not just getting me excited and other gamers who want 60 FPS. The devs themselves are doing interviews, they're talking about how much more they can do now, and you can hear it in their voices. They are excited and they want to do more, which is exactly what I said would happen. Listening to the developers is going to pay off big for Sony, but this opens up another can of worms and an even bigger question. Does this affect the timeline of the PS6? I have continued to say that I think that this generation gets pushed further than 7 to 8 years. It's going to land more in the 9 to 10 year length of time. In relation to things like development cycles are getting longer, and now in relation to just how far they can push performance this generation alone. Keep in mind, the PSSR technology will be on the PlayStation 6. So any developer that decides, hey, PlayStation's kind of our primary platform right now, this tech's fun to build with, that's not going to be a temporary decision. Games that leverage the PSSR now will benefit even more on the PS6. I've called this building cartilage between the generations, and if the PS5 gen lasts a little longer than many of us initially thought, I'm totally fine with that, because everything we're seeing on the PS5 Pro, that's more than I expected from a mid-gen refresh. It's more than I even expected from this generation at all. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do it in a comment below. I try to reply to those comments. I even feature them in the live stream that follows this. It'll hit a card here, and that link will also be pinned below as well. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.